Okay, why don't we start with the Pledge of Allegiance? And for that, I will put up the flag. Hold on. Of course, now my Zoom decides to freeze on me. Can you still hear me?
We can.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Wait, oh, here it comes.
Nice snow picture.
Yes.
There we go.
Take me off. Here we go. I pledge allegiance
Just to the flag
of the
of the
United
United States of America
and to the republic
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God,
indivisible,
liberty and justice.
and justice for all.
Hi all, sorry I'm a bit late. I was having trouble with my camera. I may be able to get it fixed.
Now I can pop back. So the first item on the agenda is approval of minutes from December 7th. Has everybody received and reviewed the minutes?
Yep.
Yes. Approve.
I'll second.
Great, thank you. And the second
That was easy.
on the list is the shared services study. And last week, you know, we determined that, you know, the information we received was good information and that we would be putting together an outline of a memorandum of understanding that can be used between the town and the BOE. Bill, were you working on that?
Yeah, let me tell you where I headed and what was sent out to you folks. My intent was in the meeting to provide several things. One was a response to the town leadership and BOE leadership based on their request, which would have gone over what we had done. And then to get into things like a memo of understanding, anything having to do with governance or the steering committee, and better definition of what's currently shared, because a lot of sharing has been taking place, and to kind of formalize that. So I really focused on that response back to the town and the BOE. And I believe that's what's attached to the material that went out. And if I'm on the right track there, and I guess my first question is whether or not this should go to the town and the BOE for their either acceptance or follow-up before we produce anything further. I'm imagining that to do something like the memo of understanding, that would be probably best done by the town and the BOE. To outline the steering committee, IS governance, I think I'd need to do that with the help of Rick and Jason and pursue down that path. But the first step is really that memo back to the town and the BOE. If you had a chance to take a look at that, any comments?
Yeah, it seemed to say exactly what the outcome was, you know, why we did it. Anybody else have any comments? I mean, I thought it was well thought out and well written.
I agree.
Yeah, I also agree.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
sounds good.
Okay. I guess I'm looking for some guidance, both in terms of that memo. If the memo is okay, is this something then that, Melissa, you would forward to the requesters?
Yeah, I think that'd probably be the easiest way to do it. I could take the memo in its current form and send it back and I don't think I need to copy the entire task force, but maybe Evan, if I just copy you as the chair and Bill as the head of the subgroup, I can just send it back to the town manager and superintendent and frame it as this is in response to your original request back whenever it was. And yeah, I think that's probably the easiest way to do it.
I think that makes sense. The other thing you can say is, if they have any questions, we'll be willing to, if they want to join one of our meetings or they want us to join one of theirs, we're more than happy to.
Perfect. Yep, I'll include that.
I have a question, Melissa, kind of targeted for you.
Mhm.
And also just to fill the task force in, there's a MOU between the Board of Ed and the town that was I think it's in draft. I think it's being finalized. There was some changes from our last meeting, and it's the overall sharing of all resources between the Board of Ed and the town.
Oh,
And it does cover a paragraph or so on IT services where we do share resources and then kind of cover some of the costs, like the shared costs between the Board of Ed. So I'm just curious as so this is kind of takes that and breaks it into more detail, right?
would it be possible to share what paragraphs are in that MOU?
Yes, I can. It's from. I'll send it to you. It's from. I pulled it up before, and there was just one paragraph, so I didn't pull it out. But let me try to find it, and it's basically just one paragraph, and then the cost sharing. So
Yeah, so that MOU, the intent behind that one, obviously that originated with our shared financial services, and then we thought, if we're going to go down this route, we may as well document the places where we share personnel, and it's actually a budgetary impact. So in this context, our two IT folks on the town side, the Board of Education funds 50% of their salaries because they, Rick and Brett, provide support to the central administration. That's the staff that's located at Town Hall for the Board of Education. The things that aren't included in that overall memo are things that are more operational. For example, I know one of the things the town manager brought up at the Board of Selectmen meeting, we do a lot of coordination and collaboration when it comes to employee benefits. But that's something we didn't include in that MOU because it doesn't have we're not sending anyone to the Board of Ed or vice versa. It's more of like an internal operations thing. And I would see this sort of in the same light. So, this is really what Rick and Jason and their respective staff does together to coordinate and collaborate and really documenting that. But it's not necessarily, a budgetary thing, if that makes sense. So that's sort of the distinction that we were drawing. That was, like you said, that this would be more of a detailed document as opposed to that one, which sort of just isolates, basically the personnel that we share between the two entities.
Well,
So
I guess
if you want me to do a quick share, I can show you just the sections that are on it, and then I'll send out the link. It's up to you.
that would be good.
Okay.
I just made you a co-host, so you should be able to share your screen.
Okay, let me find. One second. Am I sharing? I am, good. So this is the document. It's in the 1214. If you just go to the 1214 Board of Selectmen meeting, and this is the shared services agreement with the Board of Ed. And it's interesting just to see where there's things that are shared. And the MOU is still in draft form because some changes were suggested. But the section on IT is very small. Just section 3, the town working with the IT department will provide IT services to Board of Ed admin staff. This includes general help desk support related to hardware, software, and other system infrastructure. So I actually wasn't really sure we did that. So that's there. That's all they mentioned there. But you were basically saying from there we would have a deep dive of detailed who does what, even though it's not. Some of it's shared, some of it's not shared. And then it just goes down to how it's paid for, and that they share salaries. Board of Ed pays us for some of the work.
So the way I read this is essentially they expect one FTE's worth of IT services work, whatever is asked of them, pretty much, right?
Right. So you're saying half the manager, half the analyst.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess this has been a standing, because I wasn't sure it was new or old, and I was told this has existed. Correct, Maria? I'm sorry, Melissa.
It's all right. It happens all the time. Yeah, actually, all of these, well, as I said, this originated with our shared financial services, which is new. But then there are these other items that you see down here that we've been sharing for a very long time, and we've just never documented it like this. And all of them are things that kind of, as I said, have like budgetary impact or show up in the budget as something that we truly share financially in the cost of.
I guess the question is, do we need to go deeper? Is there anything that is there a concern that the Board of Ed may be using, is there any way to really tell what percentage of services are being used for the town versus the Board of Ed? Is there a measurement in place, or is that really getting crazy at this point?
I think the only thing we wanted to essentially put down on paper is how that thing functions, not specifying people per se, but to basically put on paper how the cooperation is happening, so that if staffing changes happen or administration changes happen, there is a guideline on how to keep this thing going.
Yeah. Rick, you're on, I don't know if you're able to speak, but it'd be interesting to hear, how you and the other person are engaged by the BOE, how often, and does it ever get to where you can't spend that time? Because really, the reason you have an MOU or an MOA is so the board understands what services they're getting from you and what percentage of time that takes. And then if it exceeds that, that's when you go back and say, we need to renegotiate for more staff or whatever.
No, I don't think renegotiate. I mean, I think it's an understanding that's been there it was just like Wendy said, it goes back for years, ever since I was there. And it's really an unwritten rule, an MOU at this point. And I think it was Paul that said it, or Harold, that if we document that, we are standard across desktop antivirus, spamware, security devices, and other things that are out there. I think that is the basis of the agreement that we have. Do we spend time with each other? A lot. Last week, we spent a ton of time collaborating with some issues that we had district-wide and town-wide. So that's always there. How to put it into fine print, I think that's up to us here to decide on what goes into that document specifically for those type of services. But we do go out for services, pretty much the same vendors. There's not a big discretionary there. But things like I mentioned at the desktop server level, Active Directory, those things should be put into there. And that's that detailed document that I think we're talking about. I don't know, Jason, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I would just to clarify, the paragraph really just speaks to those 2 FTE positions and how they're accounted for. But the document that Bill put together as a summary really speaks to all of the other collaboration that takes place. And I think there's been a concern over the years that it's been done in a non-documented way, where we do, as Rick just said, have environments that closely mirror each other in terms of the solutions that we choose. So I think there is a need for both, if that's the question.
Just making work visible and what is being shared visible, I think is value in itself.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the piece that you don't want to go away from that. I mean, even if it broke off or the BOE broke off or even law enforcement, that would be a cost dollar for the whole town if that was a significant change at that level. Things like, it's something that we have to ponder and think about. Even now with the library initiative, where we're piggybacking off of Jason's main port for the CN network, I mean, that's a savings to the town, but it's also a shared service there. But what they get within that connection is, spam filtering, E-rate. Jason knows a little bit more on that side for the education, but that's a big piece. That's even from the library standpoint. And
there's a lot more to it than just those 2 FTE positions.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I think that's the thing that kind of, and what Wendy was sharing there a second ago, it kind of reminds me of, I think it was Enfield's MOU that we looked at. It kind of had that same flavor to it. The difference being, I think, between the document that Wendy shared that's been developed and the one that we looked at in Enfield is they did put their structure was fairly, I guess I'll call it rigid or certainly well-defined as to how their steering committee worked and who was in charge and how things got resolved. And I think we certainly have a very functional, informal operation right now. And I would really hate to see that lost with a personnel change. And I think those are the things that, whether they're in a separate document or are added into this one, I think that's the value add here after all of our work.
But I think in addition to how materials are shared, services are shared, I think part of it also should have delineation as to how, and I don't want to say people are shared, but the manpower, how that functions. Because if we're just talking about, internet connections and so on, that doesn't give us the full picture of what's happening.
Harold, I agree with you. I think that's a good thought.
Right. So next steps here is really to compile that list of all those items that Rick was mentioning, Jason was mentioning, and get those documented. And is that something that you, Rick, and Jason can work on together for that list?
They're both non-committal right now.
No, I think it's both waiting for the other to speak, I think. We have been talking about getting some help from the task force in terms of a format, and then the two of us can work to fill that in. I think the hardest thing to start with is a blank piece of paper. So that's kind of where this is.
I know I have some samples. I don't know, Bill, if you have examples. I
think if you do have some samples, yours will be more current than mine.
Mine is more.
Actually, that was what I was finding. I was going through the internet looking for samples and realizing that I don't have my connections with Gartner Group or any of these other research firms that I used to have. So every time I'd ping them, they would ping me back with a bill, and I'm saying, wait a minute, that's not what I was looking for. So if you have something that's relatively current, my thought was if we could come up with maybe 3 one-pagers, one having to do with governance, which is the steering committee. I think that speaks a lot. If I were running the town or running the board, it speaks a lot about how things come together. and how decisions are made and how priorities are decided upon and understood between the two sides of Simsbury. And then getting into a little bit more detail where we started to talk about staffing and how staffing is shared, but then getting into platforms and maybe it's applications as well, but how those are shared and how decisions around them are done. That kind of speaks a little bit to the fact that I think we've got a lot of sharing going on. And what we're trying to do is to really document that sharing to make it more evident that the town is fully engaged in sharing for cost savings as well as for having the right expertise available at the right time. So getting back to the, if there's some formats that are available, maybe we can take those and work from there, or I can craft something up that would be more ad hoc and we can beat it around.
But the 3 parts sound pretty good as a concept.
Okay.
You do. And I can check on Gartner and Forrester for templates just for something really recent.
Yeah, if you could, because I know that they have a group that's really focused on municipal versus the BOE breakdowns. And if they got something that's relatively current, that would be a great jumping off spot for us.
That sounds good.
Yeah, and I know Bloom is doing the same thing. So, they after doing their work with us in 2016, they continue to do work with other clients. And I think in the around the middle of last year, 2020, they were publishing. So it's something that we shouldn't have to recreate from scratch.
Right. Certainly value in that. And I would just add that prior to my coming to Simsbury, I did this same job in a different town for their school district. And it was a radically different relationship between the school district and the town. I would literally classify it as adversarial. So we kind of take for granted the kind of school district and town relationship that's been built up. I've been in this role for 15 years and Rick was here before I got here. So I think since the Truman administration, isn't that right, Rick?
Where's I find you on the street?
But it just seems like that's the way it would always be and should always be. But certainly documenting it would make that more permanent. So.
Yeah, and just looking at several examples, it's the boilerplate is pretty. It's pretty much a legal document. Who are the parties? What's the purpose? What's the background? Who has the authority? What's the term of the agreement? And then what are the obligations of each party? So it's and then fees and
Penalties.
Liability. I don't think we need all of those pieces.
I was going to say, I would think we could soften that up a little bit.
Yeah. I'll take a quick and send it out.
The other thought, we did get, 3 MOUs from other towns. And to a certain degree, I know they had different entities, but there were pieces and parts of those in each one of those that I think may or may not have some value for us. So if we think we're coming up with the Simsbury Declaration of Independence for IT sharing here, that, maybe we could just turn it back and take a look at. I cringe when I hear liability and fees and obligations and all that stuff, because I don't think that's how the relationship is working.
No.
And I would hate to frame it in that light, because somebody might come in and go, oh, well, now we're going to make them play by these rules here. So I think that the thing in my mind is I think we want to make sure that we continue what, I hate to use this buzzword from my corporate days, but best practices that have evolved, and, you know, keep that moving, at least until we come to a point in time where we kind of have to take off the kid gloves and get tough. But hopefully that won't happen.
Right.
If we make the right
Make it
adversarial, yeah.
yeah.
Right.
And so that's why I'm kind of cringing when I hear that legalistic term.
Yeah, I think it's more around what are the missions, goals, and objectives of the sharing. What are
Yeah, I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
Right. To Paul's point,
Yeah.
we've basically summed up the financial relationship in that one paragraph. About
Right.
2 FTE positions.
Yeah,
No, I think that makes sense. So breaking it into 3, I mean, you actually could put the governance as one section of the MOU, right?
yeah, I think so. You could break it down to a couple of sections, and I mean, I don't know. I throw it together, and then there's always what I call the morning after effect when we look at it and go, oh, is that what we really meant?
Yeah,
But
I'll be a straw man and send it out to everybody.
yeah,
I guess I should send it to Melissa and have her send it out so it's an official document.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if you want to get the subgroup back together at all, or if you're comfortable just sort of collaborating offline about it. It's up to you guys. I can try to get something for the smaller group to get back together in between meetings to work on it too. So whatever you think would work best.
Well, I guess, I don't know. I guess we could.
Yeah, well, get something maybe in 2 weeks.
I mean, I guess, you know, Evan, once you put it together, if Rick and Jason think they've got enough to go on and want to run with it, I mean, I think, you know, that would be okay. If they think we need to sit down or things aren't clear to them or they have some other thoughts and they want to bounce them off, we could certainly do that before the next meeting. But I don't know, those are my thoughts on next steps.
I guess it depends on how good the draft is that I send out.
Yeah, it's the pressure's on you. It's all you,
Yeah.
Evan.
Exactly.
That's exactly where it's supposed to be, right, Rick?
Exactly right.
Delegate upward, right?
Right at the top.
Yeah.
And I think our objective in doing this, in better defining this, isn't to put handcuffs on our own teams here. It's to ensure that at the top of the organizations, they're comfortable that this sharing is taking place, that they
Right.
know enough to say, we're comfortable, it's working. Because I imagine what they're hearing is from towns that have taken a much more structured approach and built in all of these requirements or outsourced the whole thing. And in those cases, you've got very strict requirements that you've got to have in place in order for it to run. So I think in this particular case, we're just trying to build the confidence factor because it's working.
Yeah.
I think, you know, the big difference here is it's a partnership relationship versus a service provider customer relationship. And that's
Exactly.
the crux of the matter. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
All right, cool.
so I guess we don't need to meet again, or I'll send it out. And if Rick and Jason come back and say, you know, needs work, then we can call an interim meeting.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Good.
Yeah, it's winter. Nobody's going anywhere anyway.
COVID, nobody's going anywhere anyway. So
So yeah, winter is not the problem, I think.
I was just trying to, you know,
Change the
kind of look
subject
on
away
the,
from.
I'm kind of looking on the upside here. I'm in the, after the holidays, I'm kind of in the upside mode here.
Well, I'm doing my skiing on poor snow.
Oh,
So the last agenda item is agenda items for the next meeting. And it sounds like we want to discuss the shared services.
yeah.
Too. Anything else we want to put on the agenda for the next meeting? Anything that Jason or Rick wants us to
Yeah.
discuss?
The only thing that Rick and I had talked about briefly, and this might be not maybe for the next agenda, but maybe the agenda after that, is perhaps, because we haven't quite fleshed it out and we haven't talked to Jason yet about this, but just cybersecurity topics.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big umbrella topic. So again, we haven't really kind of fleshed out exactly what it is that we want this group to weigh in on, but potential either next meeting or the meeting after, I think. Something around that.
I was going to bring that up as a major topic given the latest.
Yeah,
last week.
The whole solar
We're not doing
wind
it.
was
I
bad.
was going to say, we're not doing any business with solar winds, are we?
Yeah.
None.
One other thought that popped in my head the other day when I was out walking. I know there was a small handful of policies or procedures that the task force had drawn up a while back. And I don't know what a while back is, but are we at some point where we should just kind of review those and say, yeah, we're okay? Or is there, gee, we should think about, as things have changed over time. And I'm not quite sure if we're at some 3 or 4 or 5 year point from when they were originally developed.
Paul,
I'd say we're probably 2 years in to those in
Okay.
general.
I was wondering if there are other things that we should take up as topics that
Well,
were
that's-
maybe left open from the Bloom-Shapiro.
That's another, well, I think the cybersecurity is probably, I don't know if there is one now, but it certainly might be fodder for one.
Yeah, we have our response procedures that we did, I don't know, 1.5 years, 2 years ago. I would leave it up to you all if there's a recommended time frame that we should be revisiting. If it's annual, if it's every other year, we can, make that a standing agenda item for a particular month if you all think it makes sense to review them periodically.
I think annually is too frequent. I think maybe every other year is a good time frame.
Yeah.
Well,
We're 2 years in right now. So,
yeah.
Take half of them each year.
yeah.
Good idea.
Well, that's certainly a good, yeah, I was thinking in the 2 to 4 years, somewhere around in there. So maybe 3 works, but I guess it depends on what they are.
Yeah.
I guess because those were done, I think what I would call BP before Paul. So I'm not quite sure exactly what you do have, what has been developed. So.
You know what I can do for the next meeting is just do like a quick, just even like a small table. It's not many, just a handful of policies we have, and what it is, the date that it was adopted, and maybe a quick summary, and then you can take a look at it.
Yeah, are they on the shared? I didn't have a chance this afternoon to take a look at the shared at Google Drive to see if they were out there.
They should be, but they should all be on there. But I can double check.
Okay. Well, maybe that's something we should, if we all can try to review those and then maybe have a quick discussion and button something up maybe next meeting or the meeting after, depending on how much time we think shared services is going to take for the MOU.
We'll try it for next week, and if we don't get to it, we push it another week. That's all.
Or next month, or next month, not next week.
Sorry.
Okay.
Some of us are retired.
Some of us wish we were retired. The other item, one question I guess if we bring up cybersecurity as a topic, one thing that's been happening a lot are tabletop exercises in different companies for incident response. I don't know if, the town or the Board of Ed does any of those to simulate how you would react, how long it would take, et cetera, in the event of either a breach or a major security incident like ransomware or something hitting, and then go through the steps that you would take and kind of identify the timelines, how long it would take to do each piece and before you're, out of the woods.
Yeah, I don't think
that idea.
I don't think we've done something like that, Jason, Rick.
We haven't done-
Specifically, I know we've done other tabletop exercises related to other emergency management exercises, and there's always an IT component, but I don't think we've done one specific to that.
No, the state came out with one last year that we participated with in Middletown, but they never. I don't know where that ended up, but it was kind of like a game board scenario with timelines and everything else. But after that one session, we didn't hear anything back from them, or I don't know if they rolled that out.
That's too bad. That's too bad, because those are a lot of, depending on how detailed you get, that's a lot of work to set those things up. So to have a session and then just kind of drop it midstream, that's kind of.
Yeah, they were actually working with emergency services in Middletown and Homeland Security. So there was a couple of federal partners and also state partners. I thought they were rolling it out, but since that one meeting, I haven't heard anything on that.
Rick, you guys used the Know Before some time back?
Yeah, I think we're in our third year, Melissa, of Know Before, and that's worked out pretty well for us.
Yeah.
Actually, it works out so well is that Brett and I, field emails when the employees that are under that program get something and they're not sure. We usually get them and say, "Hey, can you give us a quick eye?" So that's part of our day, which is great because they're not taking a chance.
No.
And not that we know all, but at least it's going through a couple eyes and, a train set and a user eye. So that's good. And just with the whole COVID thing, we've kind of like laid back a little bit on the phishing campaigns that we have, just because there's just a tremendous amount out there. And right now, one important thing, if I could say, with this whole MOU that's out there is the whole spam filtering and support that both district and town get. You could ask Jason. that our equipment's getting hammered daily with the amount of traffic that it's protecting us. So at that level, pat on our backs if we have to. But that next level is really the Know Before, and that's the employee awareness part. It's always there. We can't catch everything, but that's an important piece of the program that we have for cybersecurity awareness.
Hey, Rick, this is Ray. Is there a formalized employee training plan in place for cybersecurity? I know we've talked about this a little bit on and off, and you guys do some exercises, but is that a recurring, regular event?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Great.
So I'll pick and choose the appropriate times for that. There was, I can't discuss it now, but there has been some events going on where I'm ready to roll something out, and just because of the conditions on the internet, I hold back on it, which would probably cause more confusion for our employees. So we refrain from doing that. So we have to pick and choose when we roll those out. They don't know. Only, 3 people know when those things are coming out.
Gotcha.
Okay, with that, any other business anyone wants to discuss? If not, can we have a motion to adjourn?
Let's adjourn.
I second.